Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Kane Sims here from VUX World. I want to chat about Agile Development and to try and help you understand whether you should use Agile Development or Agile Delivery in your voice applications. Agile is a bit of a buzz phrase at the moment in UX design and design in general, and the guidance even from Amazon and from the big players and from most people working in voice, the guidance is to release something early, crawl before you walk, learn from it and iterate. That is what I would call Agile implementation. Agile implementation is when you release something early and learn from it and iterate and then continue to release incrementally after that. The aim of Agile implementation is that you're able to extract business value early, and that's the key message, extracting value early. The reason for that is that 80% of people, typically in most software applications, 80% of users only use 20% of your features. What this enables you to do is release incrementally, which means that you release a chunk of functionality that meets the needs of most people, call that version 1. Then you can learn from those people using it, you can prioritize the features that you've got left, and you can work on the next most important increment and release that increment after that. And you prioritize those features based on the value that the business will get from having them in the application, or the value the user will get from having them in the application. Now in voice, the value to the business might actually be learning. It might be that your first iteration is simply to learn from something, test a hypothesis and see whether or not the use case is valid and whether or not your design is good. That's the first question to ask. What value would we get from releasing this early, or what value would the users get from releasing this early? The second strand of Agile is Agile Development. What Agile Development is having a prioritized backlog. You work through the backlog in an agile way. So for example, you'll still be breaking the whole thing down into increments, and you'll still be working on the top functionality that most people need most of the time, your must-have requirements, and you'll still be building the first release of that increment as you would do if you were releasing it incrementally. However, you might not release it straight away. So for example, you might have a shopping application, a shopping skill, and the first thing you think is that the most important thing, the thing that's going to really add value to the business and serve a better user need, the most appropriate user need, would be being able to check out and pay for something within the application. So you may prioritize checking out and making a payment. So you might have that released or able to be released as a developed and finished chunk or increment, but you might not release it because you might want support and functionality to sit around it to make the whole experience better. So for example, your next priority might be having a shopping list. In order to do that, you might need to be able to browse products or ask about products and find product descriptions and get prices for the user to be able to understand whether or not they want to add that to their shopping list. And so there may be a load of different features from further down here that you need to implement in order to get this next most important iteration or increment. And then you would work through the development, developing out all of your increments, and then you would release that whenever the deadline is. That's kind of a waterfall implementation with Agile Development. So for example, waterfall is kind of like this. You start out by gathering your requirements, and then you will develop your requirements, and then you will test, and then you will deploy. And what that means is that you spend all of your time gathering requirements, all of your time working on features that 80% of people won't use, and then you do all of your testing after the fact. So it doesn't matter what you learn there, you've got a whole load of rebuilding to do if you do want to go and rebuild it, and then you deploy it. And this is the point where you actually meet end users. So usually with a waterfall kind of methodology, you don't end up getting in front of users until later on. With Agile, you can get in front of users at this point, so with increment 1. As soon as you've got something that can stand on its own as an MVP on its own, you can test that with users, you can refine that, you can build on that, and then you can add the next increment on. The reason why I wanted to cover this two elements of Agile is because we're very keen to just dive into Agile and talk about Agile and be cool and all that kind of thing. But sometimes you might want a blend of two methodologies. So you might not want to release your first increment straight away. You might want to develop your increments together, still using the agile practices of testing constantly and constantly prioritizing the next must-have features and developing increments and all that kind of thing. But you might release the whole lot at a fixed point in time, at a deadline. The benefits of implementing early is that you extract business value or user value quicker. The benefits of developing in an agile way and releasing it later on is that you end up releasing more of a well-rounded experience. There's a chap at Adobe called Jay Meisner, and he spoke at Mobile UX London last year. I don't know if it's online, but check it out if it is. One of the things that he said that stuck with me was that people are far too busy trying to release things as early as possible. And when you release things as early as possible, you don't fully consider the full implications that that thing can have. Now, he was talking on a big scale, like if you were to release a voice assistant like Alexa or Google Assistant, and you want to release that early, then you might not be fully considering what the impact of that technology might be over the course of time for things like privacy and ethics and stuff like that. I think that applies to voice as well. Are you scrambling around trying to just release the basic version of something just to get it out there? Or are you fully considering what the full end-to-end experience should and could be? For example, if you're releasing an interactive story, then it may make sense to develop it in an agile way. Maybe you kind of get a straw man or straw person diagram that shows the ideal path and the various different scenes that you might have. You might not finish the dialogue entirely, but you might want to prototype it to see whether or not it's engaging. You'll iterate the dialogue and you'll change it as you go forward. But there might be things in there that you would want to have, like in-skill purchasing, like really good and thought out and effective sound design, like using variables so that you can personalize the experience as you go through. Now, you don't need all of those things to release your version 1. You could release version 1 just with the dialogue, with a text-to-speech voice and the tree mapped out, and that will be it. If you wanted to have a proper, professional, high-quality, world-class voice experience, then you will need the sound design, you will need things like in-skill purchasing and variables to make it personalized and all of those kind of things. Probably want to stay away from Waterfall regardless, because you definitely want to be getting it in front of people as early as you possibly can, and you might not need to be developing and creating all of these things right the way down the bottom of the pecking order, which Waterfall would kind of encourage you to do so. With Agile Development, at least you're working on the most important stuff all the time, and you're developing still in increments. Every single thing can stand on its own if it needs to, but adding those increments on during the development process and then going live at the end of it means that, first of all, you've already done a whole load of testing, so you're already confident that the end result is good. And it means that you're releasing something that has slightly more bells and whistles and Easter eggs and some of the functionality that you might not have time to do if you were just releasing your MVP as early as you possibly can. And that's it. Let me know if that was useful. Let me know if you use agile implementation or agile development when you're creating voice experiences, and what you think the benefits and drawbacks of these two types of methodologies are. Until next time, see you later.